with you, and I'm going to put here the full screen. Okay, so allow me to start, and I'll do this in hopefully less than 20 minutes so we can have a discussion following it. First of all, I'm going to talk about the city that I've been working, which is Cascais. So Cascais is located in the outer skirts of Lisbon. So in the end of Europe, like a poem says, where the land meets its end and the ocean starts. We have quite a long coast here, so sea level rise is an issue for us, and we are a very touristic destination. So not only are we part of the local metropolitan area of Lisbon, but also 1/3 of our land is protected heritage. We are not that big. We are 200,000 inhabitants, and but we do grow quite a lot. We have over 2 million tourists every year in Cascais. But obviously, we are facing some climate challenges. As you can see, we have the usual sea level rise. We have an increase of storms that have been recorded, both in frequency and intensity. We have more severe floods. We have a fire hazard that has been rising every year. So the days where you have a high level of fire hazard have been increasing. And on the last bottom picture, on the bottom right side, you can see a beach full of pebbles. So for the first time, one of the first times in Portugal, the Portuguese Environmental Institute removed the classification of that beach. That is called the UrbanA beach, and it used to have sand. But the sedimentation changed quite significantly. So they had to remove the classification as a beach because it became dangerous. So nowadays it's only pebbles. The sand comes back every now and then, but most of all, it doesn't. So this is a visualization of how sea level rise and climate change is impacting us. So it's a very tangible element. Whether when we talk about floods or fires, they have been happening since forever. But the increase of frequency and intensity is something that for some people it's very difficult to visualize. But when it comes to this is a very visible impact. So we work with the climate scenarios, obviously. Generally speaking, we are engaged with the IPCC's methodologies. We understand what's going on, where we need to act, and how exactly we need to act. So we all know that we need to be under the 400 parts per million, but we are increasing our concentration of CO2 equivalent on the atmosphere, and it's still over 412 parts per million. And even despite all the situation with the pandemic situation of the COVID-19, I'm very curious to know how the emission rates dropped and what are the impacts of that. When we talk about climate action, we talk mostly about two strategies: mitigation and adaptation. So if we have a problem that is made by man-made, then we need to reduce our contribution to that problem. So we have to mitigate our emissions. And when we do that, we have a global impact. That is mitigation. The other side of the coin is adaptation. So we're facing climate impacts, and we need to adapt to it, whether we manage to mitigate the problem or not. Change is happening. We need to prepare for it, and we need to use our biological preparedness for this. We are, as animals, we are prepared to adapt to our environment. We need to make sure that our local human and physical geography are well prepared, and our relationship with the environment is better prepared. So this comes with the resilience term. And all these strategies come through innovation. And I'm not talking about technological development. I'm talking about the way that we use our resources, that we have to be more efficient, the way that we occupy our land through spatial planning, and the way that we interact with each other. So it's a mix. This is indeed a systemic approach for a systemic problem. So when I talk about this relationship with the local climate impacts and also our adaptation capacity, which is called the adaptive capacity, we are actually promoting transformative actions. This is a key word, transformative actions while we are increasing our capacity to reply to a given challenge. So when we implement these actions through greater capacity, we are promoting resilience. Resilience is a broad term. So you can use it usually for civil protection, you can usually for the economy, for a given population or community, but on climate change, once again, it's systemic. And let's see how it goes. So in Cascais, we started to work 11 years ago with the first strategy plan for climate change, where we did a thorough assessment of the climate impacts that we were facing according to the IPCC scenarios. And we actually had quite a leverage here, because that picture that you see there is a tide gauge in Cascais. And that tide gauge in Cascais is 135 years old. And it's the oldest tide gauge in the world. And it's been recording data since that time. So I have to tell you that scientific data from over 100 years ago have proven that in Cascais coast, the sea level rise has increased 14 centimeters. That's substantial, because people think, oh, it's just 14 centimeters. Yeah, but if you imagine that volume of water all across the vast amplitude of the oceans, and it's moving with the storms and hitting our coast with the waves and feeding more storms, that is substantial. And when we got to that action, we immediately, or that strategy, we immediately started to act. So we had, since we were one of the first in Portugal and actually in Europe to have one of these, we immediately started to work with European-based projects. For example, the base adaptation project was crucial for us because it gave us a better capacity to engage with stakeholders and citizens alike to help us to develop action strategies for adaptation. And this was very structural work. Then we did the first master's plan with climate data and climate scenarios, where if we build something here or something there, what should we consider to ensure that this three-dimensional spatial planning is included. We also started to report our actions. Are we going in the right path or in the wrong path? We worked with other nationals with the Klima Adapt local project financed by the EA grants. We worked simultaneously with 27 other municipalities to help them develop their own climate strategy. Basically, learning from our mistakes and following a bit, not our guidance, but our experiences on this. So that was very interesting, because 10% of the municipalities got their climate strategy from this, and at the same time, they represent nearly 1/3 of the Portuguese population. So that was massive for us. And then we obviously followed some Horizon 2020 projects, trying to engage citizens, trying to develop technology, trying to integrate the student and teacher community, all at the same time as the international commitments went through. So this was basically seek and construct approach, because there were so many financing opportunities around Europe and national side that we just needed to grab them to tackle what the strategy said. But I have to admit that throughout this process, we didn't really have an action strategy or a commitment towards this. We had a climate diagnosis. We were working very hard into fighting these, but we needed to have a greater impact, and we need to be more unified as a municipality to work on this. So back in 2017, we developed what was the first climate action plan in Portugal. So climate action in Cascais followed, I would like to say, two dimensions. The first one is, well, adaptation, like I said, it's a biological aspect to ourselves. So we throw this in our society. We have to adapt, and sometimes we are able to adapt, sometimes we're not so able to adapt, but we do adapt. So when we're working with the European Commission, and when we're working with our own staff and stakeholders, local staff and stakeholders, we already do something that helps this process. So we have, for example, working with the civil protection and the fire hazard. We're working with the dune protection system that don't necessarily protect against sea level rise, but they protect the biodiversity there. We've been actively engaged with other schools with the developing schools programs, and actively engaged with environmental awareness for citizens alike. So this is just a few examples how the European approach and how the national and local approach kind of merged together and already developed something that we already did. So we reached the action plan for 2030. So we planned ahead. For the first time, we had a plan that was a commitment ahead of the political term. So every 4 years you have a cycle, it's ended, then it's over, and it's something that it's not very nice to have, especially because climate change is so long-term. We upgraded or updated actually the climate scenarios with the IPCC5 methodology. And we also increased the collaboration and interinstitutional collaboration with the local stakeholders and even national stakeholders. So this is not a plan for us by us. This is a plan by everybody for us, specifically in Cascais, because of our geography and our response capabilities. We also developed some integration with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030. So there's the 13th goal, which is climate action, and that's why we actually chose the end term 2030, is to reply directly to this. And finally, this was submitted to town hall meeting, meaning that it's a mandatory commitment to fulfill this. So this is a political and social plan, I would like to call that way. So we worked with the stakeholders workshops. We had workshops for each sector, and these were not necessarily the IPCC sector, like I mentioned in 2009. So the IPCC has general sectors, but in each city, they are implemented by organizations or departments. And we need to make sure that the theoretical approach matches the operational approach. So there's the theory of how it should be implemented, and then there's the people who actually implement it. And we need to merge both of them. So we did 6 sectors according to the operational capabilities and organizations that we have in Cascais. And they went really well because we had over 130 people working on it. We got all the information from them. Once again, through inquiries, through assessments within the workshop, we asked them, okay, this is what's going to happen climate-wise. How will it impact you? And what are you doing already to contribute to this? And what do you recommend us that we all do to tackle this challenge? And this question or this challenge is very important because I'm not an expert on water resources, for example, or biodiversity promotion, for example. So I should be deciding for them. They should be brought into this process and make sure that they are capacitated and are well informed to provide information to us, so we can therefore give them resources for them to act to promote their resilience. Finally, I'd like to say that we also did over 1,800 inquiries to the citizens, normal citizens. And for them, climate change is a priority of action and it should be considered as a political priority. But no one said that they wanted to have a specific tax to tackle climate action. And this was very important for us because of green finance. We thought that maybe if we have a green tax or something like that, we could easily gather some money to do this. Don't go that way. That's a lesson that we learned because not a single person said that. Finally, we eased communication. So on the left side, you have the charts that actually are from the plan, the 2017 action plan. And these are the different IPCC scenarios for Cascais. One is for temperature and the other is for increased rain rate. So obviously there's no legend here. So you're probably looking, well, what does this mean? But even if there's a legend here, it means that a lot of our stakeholders don't understand this information. So we have to simplify the way that we communicate. That's why we use the right side scheme. Whenever we work with some people working in agriculture on health-related activities, we tend to use this simple information because we can later translate in how this impacts them directly. So communication is crucial. Finally, this is the result. So we had all those people telling us, okay, what should we do as a priority for action? And this is what they gave us. 13 measures that are comprised by 82 very specific actions. Over 11 million euros of investment for this adaptation. And most of the actions are actually non-structural or green solutions. And for me, like the internet meme says, like that guy, like poof, this was a poof moment for me. Because the experts actually told us that adaptation requires a better relationship with the environment and a better relationship among ourselves, communicating better what's going to happen. It's not about infrastructure. It's not about building bigger dams or higher roads or water infrastructures or whatever. It's about bringing nature back into the city. And this is actually what you see on this table. We start with the total priority, which is stakeholder awareness. All the 6 groups voted this as a priority. They matched the priority. Then we have something that is very specific to us, which is to separate the network of residual and pluvial water. For example, it's something that is very specific for us, and other cities probably don't understand that. And when it comes to gray infrastructure, it's mostly for water supply, because since we're having less available water, we need to make sure that we use it more efficiently and we reduce the losses, the water losses on this. And all of them reply transversely to the SDGs 2030 from the UN. So it's not only the climate action, it's transversal. And let's see how. So we had 5 operational groups. The first one was awareness and education. So we worked a lot with the school community. We engaged in climathons. We engaged with art exhibitions, photo exhibitions. The one that you see here is from internet, where we did some partnerships. We qualified our staff and our how do you say this? Our teaching community as well. We engaged students from different classes, and we qualified staff by organizing multiple institutional work here. So over 30,000 citizens were reached, most of them by these photo exhibitions and art exhibitions that we do on the street. So let's think of that. Then we have another group, which is the ecological infrastructure and resilient urban green spaces. And why is this important for us? So Cascais is located in the Southern Europe. So we don't have much rain anymore, and we need green spaces. However, green spaces use a lot of resources, especially through water and maintenance, right? Well, we can't have this water just wasted for this. We have to use it more efficiently. So what we did was, for example, on urban green spaces, we started to develop the resilient green spaces where we use autochthonous plants. They are fairly new, and we grow them our own. So we don't need to buy them. We're actually promoting the biodiversity and putting in urban systems. For example, the middle right picture that you see is actually the decoration of a roundabout, a street roundabout that you have. And that roundabout is usually we had lawns in it, so we need to water the roundabout. And now we just use pebbles, rocks. These are logs that were cut, reused for this purpose. And we did kind of like an art thing where we placed like a chess of different materials on this roundabout. There's no water need here, absolutely zero. So we reduced that significantly. Then we did something that was extremely important for us, which is the naturalization of the riverbed of Vinhas, which cuts the municipality from north to south over 8 kilometers. And it allows the air, the cool air, to go in the city, thus mitigating what is called the urban heat island effect, which we have been measuring. And it reaches 2 centigrade degrees, which is quite a lot. So this is just to do a few examples of what we're doing. Then we have the adaptation, which is a civil protection and health. So this is, once again, the systemic approach. When we do the riverbed naturalization where people can walk, we're actually promoting flooding areas, natural flooding areas. So if there's an overflow of water, they don't destroy any infrastructure. They don't do it in the urban areas. They do it upstream in these places, like you can see on the top right photo. Then we started to also communicate a lot of information for tourists. We have totem poles, for example, that communicate the UV, and we have increasing our fire vigilance. And why is that? Because on the top left corner photo, it's a picture that I took it myself because I was thrown out the house at 2 in the morning because there was a fire coming, and this fire was extremely violent, and it happened in late October, which is definitely not the fire season, but it is now. And we have to adapt because we need better resources to make sure that the vigilant teams are there in a broader period of time. So nothing new in a sense that we need to do new areas. We just need to have our adaptive capacity resources to merge the reply to this broader need. So what you see on the left side is actually a recording from the meteorological station network that we have here. I have a link, but I'll show you later on because we don't have much time. And then we have the spatial planning. So spatial planning, I would call it like the law-abiding of adaptation. Whenever I'm talking about any other idea that I've mentioned previously, we have 82 of those examples, so I just named a few. We need to make them law-abiding. So we make sure that this is the standard approach. So like I said, we developed the first climate topos chart and then placed some indication in the regulations. And now we're building something with our staff, the urban and spatial planning, but also trying to make sure that local urban projects have these principles included. So this is something that we are trying very actively to achieve, but when it comes to law, it's much more challenging, as you can imagine. Yeah, somebody made, Tom, was it you? You made this circle here? No, not you?
Not me, I don't think.
Okay, so somebody made this circle around here. Oh yeah, it's gone. Okay, so then you have my synthesis approach, and let's pay attention to something that I've learned as well. So most actions that tackle these vulnerabilities are nature-based solutions. Let's bring nature back into the city. If we engage stakeholders right from the start, we together will have a greater and more efficient approach on climate adaptation. Cost-benefit analysis is fundamental because we know the cost of action versus the cost of inaction, but the economic approach is extremely difficult to assess. So we need to work with insurance companies as well. For example, the greenway restoration that I've mentioned cost a bit over 300,000 euros. But the gray solution that was expected by the National Institute of Environment was actually 2 million, which was dams. Imagine that. So this was fairly innovative, and we learned altogether from this. And like I said, if you look at the right chart, we have the implementation percentage already going through. Nearly 50% is continuous implementation. And what does this mean? This is not a one-shot implementation like those 9%, like I need to build something, there it is, I've done it, let's checkbox. Continuous implementations means that you need to check a new way of working. For example, the example that I gave you on green spaces, you need to design green spaces that are more resilient. You need to broaden your sense of how do you call it, of working for the fire hazard in a broader range of period per year. That is continuous implementation. Every year, every time you need to adapt to it. And this is why I say that we have a transformative approach. We transform the way that we worked. And this is extremely relevant because we're qualifying people, we're giving them more relevant work, not added work, but we're adding relevance to the work that they're doing already. And we're helping us together to achieve this transformation in our own institution. So we're working together with citizens. Thus conclusion, which is we have a vision for 2030, which is a resilient city where we need to regenerate and promote a transition, not a cut through transformation. We need to make sure that people are aware that we need to flow, I would use the term flow, to a new template of how we use our resources and how we occupy our land, most of all. So Tom, back to you, I would guess. Probably stop the screen sharing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's still with you, Joao. It's a great presentation, fantastic. The depth